All right, we are in the middle of silly season, aka the transfer window, and always there's lots of stories, some believable and some not. And back in 2009, actually 10 years today, a hoax was exposed, and we actually have the source of this hoax on the line at the moment. Declan Varley from Galway, how are you?
I'm good, actually. I'm good. Hard to believe it's been 10 years of Masal Bugduv.
Yes, Masal Bugduv. So just to actually frame this story, so this is a Moldovan footballer. He's only 16 years old, has lots of potential, and according to the Times, at least at one time, he was among the top 50 players in terms of potential.
Indeed, he was actually. He was in at number 30 in the Times list of top 50 players. He was ahead of Ozil and Lewandowski, so it actually didn't work out as well for him as it did for the others. But he was highly regarded at one stage.
Yeah. So just to paint the picture of maybe why you created this character or this player, Masal Bugduv, why did you do it, and what was the kind of situation with gossip columns in and around that time?
Well, sort of around that time, really, you were depending on. We had moved on from CFAX and Airtel, and sort of it was the beginning of Twitter, but Twitter hadn't really sort of evolved, and so it was a very sort of fertile growing ground for football rumours to be circulated. At the time, as you know, as a football fan, the football transfer window is fancy time.
Yeah,
you scour the media during all of this month, or these 2 months or 3 months in the year, whereby you hope that your team will be signing the next Ronaldo, the next Messi, whoever it is. But and often, sort of a lot of the time, it's just sort of total rubbish, you know. And in one sense, what got me thinking about it at the time was that it's the only element of information in which we're prepared to be fed rumour or falsehood in one sense. And I think football transfer speculation was the original fake news way before Donald Trump came up with the term. It's because if we were fed news, say general news, and we sort of only expected it to sort of had a 10% chance of it being true, you wouldn't really accept that.
Yeah.
But with football transfer speculation, we always do. So I think that I wanted to make a point about how far a fake player could fly if he was invented. So I came up with the idea of a social experiment whereby I would create a fake player. I gave him a name of Masal Bugduv because it was the phonetic spelling of Masal Bugduv, which is my little black donkey. The short story by Pádraig Ó Conairí. He's the writer from Galway in the 1930s, whose statue is actually in the middle of Ayr Square. And he had a story about a donkey, about a man trying to sell a donkey, a useless donkey, and trying to get a better price from it than it was actually worth. Now, in one sense, this was a great metaphor for the transfer market, because selling useless donkeys is what the transfer market really is. It's about agents selling players for a higher value than they probably have. So I just thought that would be the name I'd go with. I spelt it Masal Bugduv as Masalbugduv, and I had to give him an existence. Now, I didn't want to make him a superstar at the time because it wouldn't have flown if he was. I really wanted to make the point that he had great potential. So he was going to be young. He was going to be built like a tank, like Wayne Rooney. He was going to be based in Moldova, where, you know, people sort of on this side of the world actually wouldn't be following Moldovan football to the extent that they would know whether he existed or not. So I went onto the Moldovan Wikipedia page and I just added him to the Moldovan national squad. And so in that, I also gave him an assist in his debut for Moldova. I didn't want to give him a goal.
Yeah,
I didn't want to make him totally incredible. So he had an incredible shimmy, and he shot from 35 yards with the keeper parried out, and it was the goal was scored. Now, at the time, there was a player playing for Moldova called Bugiev. Bugiev actually scored against Ireland in the qualification rounds for the 2018 World Cup, I think. So I think there was a little bit of confusion because Bugiev and Bugduv sounded very similar. But this was back in 2009. Around the same time, the movie Borat was out. And you may remember from Borat that he had an agent who was a slovenly man, overweight, unshaven. But the kind of agent you would like to have to get a deal done for you. So I gave him an agent called Sergei Yelikov. And so Sergei Yelikov was the man who was issuing all these press statements on behalf of the young 16-year-old Masal Bugduv, who had great potential. It was also the era when Sepp Blatter and Cristiano Ronaldo referred to footballers' contracts as being akin to slavery. These are remarks which caused great furore at the time in 2009 when they were said. So players at the time were in general seen as being mouthy and whiny and demanding. So it was a sort of very good environment into which Bugduv could arrive. You know, he had a comment to say about everything. He issued a statement about the interest in joining Arsenal, and I then framed these in the style of Associated Press reports. I just start out every report with AP Moldova Tuesday, and then a comment from Bugduv, and just send it out online, never publishing it anywhere, just saying on chat boards and message boards, have you seen this? And it flew around the world. It just picked up, because football fans will be searching for key terms like Arsenal or transfer or whatever, and it just sort of grew legs and legs. I then wanted to develop him further. I had him picked against Luxembourg to play in a World Cup qualifier, and he came out with the proclamatory statement that I will destroy Luxembourg and then join Arsenal. But so all the Arsenal fans, and it was on the BBC chat board as well, were saying, "Wow, who's this guy coming through?" At the time, Arsenal were renowned for buying potential, a lot of potential which didn't really, wasn't ever fulfilled. But so he was a real character in one sense. He was mentioned on Sky Sports News in the line of lists of players who were linked with different clubs. Sort of during the summer times when really, you're just trying to fill space. I think Mark Hughes, who was manager of Man City at the time, was asked if he'd buy him, and Mark just obviously never heard of him, had just said, yes, we would not rule anything in, or we would not rule anything out.
Actually, just on that, because the fact that he even just said that, because obviously there are scouts and things that deal with that, and they have their transfer departments, but even the fact that maybe he didn't want to pretend that he didn't know of certain players, fake or not, that says a lot maybe about the football industry too.
Oh, it totally does. I mean, a lot of it is to do with, you don't want to be, you don't want to look foolish. You don't want sort of Bugduv to become suddenly successful, and Mark Hughes has said, I've never heard of him. But it's into that kind of environment that you could create something like this. And at the time as well too, I think Harry Redknapp had said something like he had a go at unknown players in general, say from the likes of Moldova and Lithuania. He made some comment about saying, well, I'm not going to go out and sign an unknown player from Moldova or Lithuania. So Bugduv had a lash back at that in one sense. So even this guy, even though he didn't exist, he was having imaginary spats with football managers. So basically the whole point was he was staying in the news for 3/4 of the transfer window in 2008, 2009. And as the summer progressed without a transfer, obviously he wasn't going to get a transfer because he didn't exist, which, is a bit of a disadvantage for a player, even though you see Mesut Ozil and you wonder why. But he was linked to Cork City as well in a move that would have seen him loaned to Reading to get around work permit issues. Basically, I just kept feeding I needed to have a constant flow of information about Masal Bugduv, and he got 1,000 mentions on Google, which was pretty good, considering he didn't exist. There wasn't any photograph of him. There wasn't any video of him. There were no interviews with him, audio or video. Yeah. So basically, he was 1,000 mentions isn't bad for a player who doesn't exist. But then he was named on the FIFA site and on goal.com and Fuensahar.com, the websites, as being the only bright spark on the horizon for Moldova amidst all the nationalist strife that was tearing the country apart at the time. That the only bright spark was this young 16-year-old player, Masal Bugduv. So he was existing under the radar. Now, what happened 10 years ago today was that the Times of London, which is the oldest paper in the world to be covering football, actually compiled its list of the 50 best young players, and he was named at number 30, which is amazing.
Actually I have the entry here in front of me. It's obviously, as you said, number 30. He plays for Olimpia Balti, Moldova's finest. The 16-year-old attacker has been strongly linked with a move to Arsenal, work permit permitting, and he's been linked with plenty of other top clubs as well. Based on what was out there, it's not that far off, but of course it is based off of a hoax.
Totally. And that list was syndicated around the world because January, this time of the year, people see these lists. I'm sure they're in all the papers for the last while during the silly season of the transfer window, and people read them. People want to see the list. So that list was syndicated by the Times, who would be a very authoritative football publication, and that was sent around the world, and it sort of gathered legs. But what happened is a Russian journalist spotted it, a Russian journalist who covered Moldovan football, and he just made a comment saying, this player doesn't exist, And this was picked up by Slate and a blogger called Brian Phillips, who then went on a kind of an investigative search to see what was happening here. And within days, they had sort of clarified that Bugduv didn't exist, but there was some. But he was at that stage. The Times realised this. They went in to take him out of the top. Instead of moving everybody up one and taking him out, they took him out totally, and they replaced him by a player who wasn't in the original top 50, a player called Jay Simpson, who ironically did play for Arsenal at the time. So he went from sort of not being in the top 50 at all to suddenly being number 30 in the world. And of course, when this mistake was highlighted, the whole Bugduv story sort of grew legs and got bigger and bigger and multiplied. And at one stage, on this day 10 years ago, he was on 106 million hits on Google. Right. So Bugduv was pretty big. And if I'd sold him for a penny a hit at the time, I'd have made a fortune. But it wasn't the case. It wasn't the case at all. Yeah. Now, what's happened since, though? In one sense, though, the Bugduv story it says more about the state of journalism than it does about the state of football. In one sense, because obviously someone was just asked to sort of pull together a list and went to Mr. Google, and Mr. Google will tell you everything. Sort of back in the day, starting out in journalism, you're always sort of told to you check your three sources: the guards, the priest, and the local shopkeeper, and so on and so on. But nowadays, people just go to Google to get the information, and that's obviously what happened then. And Masal Bugduv got legs and became the greatest player who never was.
Yeah, and especially because you've done so much work around it. So the Wikipedia is one thing, which is often an easy way to start off, and then after that, those press association reports, or at least the fake ones, they would look legitimate to certain people who might not look too closely. And maybe that also says something about the state of modern journalism, because actually you could just make a phone call. I know Moldova would be a harder place, of course, to make contact with linguistically and otherwise, but the fact that it slips through the cracks does say something, especially getting up to number 30 as well, ahead of the likes of Ozil and Lewandowski.
Indeed, totally. And I mean, even in 2009, there would have been video footage and photographs of Masal Bugduv. I mean, the fact that he made it so far, sort of through word of mouth, really sort of says an awful lot. Now, the Masal Bugduv story is now it's now a subject on the syllabus on some American universities who use the saga as to investigate the role of truth in digital journalism. So I've been talking to a lot of people like that. There have been various presentations and papers done on it. Every year there are new presentations where Masal Bugduv comes up as the sample of how the media can be caught out. It was named the second biggest hoax in a sports hoax on the internet there a few years ago as well too. So he does live on, even though he doesn't live on, and even though he didn't exist. Yeah. But it's a great lesson to us all. And
maybe a final point, actually, just kind of thinking about this story and what transfer gossip rumours are like. I don't know if it's my age now, as I've got a bit older, but I don't really click on them as I used to do, or in the old CFAX days, I think it was page 338 on the BBC, I think was the place to get them. I used to consume those voraciously, but now I don't, I wait till a transfer has happened, and then, I'll read the story then, but for some reason I don't know if it's my age or if I'm just not connecting to it anymore, or maybe I just don't care as much about transfer rumours. But I don't know, have you found maybe gossip columns have changed slightly in that sense also?
Yes, I think so. I think that we have never had more information at any stage in the world than we have now. I mean, you can. I think would Masal Bugduv work in this environment? He may or he may not. It's just that everyone's a journalist now, and everyone can be an investigative journalist now as well, using Twitter. So I don't think he would have flown very long if he had been launched in 2019 as opposed to sort of 2009. I think too the way that sports or the football transfers are carried out now, the clubs are playing more of a game as well too. They make an event of the whole announcement, and even when a player is like 99% assigned, like it's still never really there. I think the fans now are more dubious about and more suspicious of the information we're getting than they were back in that day.
Yeah, and also maybe like a growing number of foreign players coming into the league. It doesn't feel as much of a novelty than if there's maybe an unusual name or something like that in comparison to, I know 2009 by that stage it had actually, in the Premier League particularly, there were a lot of foreign players at that point, but maybe not even as much as today.
Indeed, and I suppose the thing about football fans is that they are prepared to learn new names and every year and sort of to be assailed with a lot of information about players you've never heard of. I mean, not many people sort of up to this year had heard of Lucas Torreira until he played for Uruguay in the World Cup and until he joined Arsenal, and now he's a kind of a household name almost. And players like that. I mean, we're new names come along all the time, and new players. And it's unlikely that Bugduv would be as successful now as he would have been 10 years ago.
Yeah, and you mentioned the statue of Patrick O'Connor in Galway. Is there going to be one of Masal Bugduv as well, just for this notoriety?
It's funny you should say that in one sense, because the pub in Connemara, Michal Kine's pub, G Kine in the far side of Connemara, where Patrick O'Connor used to drink sort of 60, 70 years ago, they were fascinated by this story, and there was a mannequin of Masal Bugduv wearing the Moldovan number 10 jersey placed in the corner of that pub for a while. So it was a real talking point, and Masal Bugduv lives on. I mean, every transfer window, I still do interviews about the Masal Bugduv story. If you Google Masal Bugduv online, you'll see news stories about it all the time, all over the world, all different languages. So I think people love a good hoax, and I think what is really, in one sense, there was a great Irishness to this hoax as well, because the paper that sort of through which Bugduv used to issue his statements was a paper which was named Diario Mohone, which is basically the diary of my arse. And so basically, Irish people who spotted this straight away knew it was a hoax, but it certainly caught the rest of the world out.
It certainly did, and 10 years on, it continues to live on, and of course it's a really good-natured hoax as well, and from a journalist's point of view as well, it does kind of make you think a bit about your own industry as well, which is the other great thing. So
it does indeed, and the official biography of Masal Bugduv will be published later this year, called Number 30.
Good stuff.
Greatest player who never was.
We look forward to that anyway.
I should have sold him though, perhaps,
you should have, just when he was at his peak price. That should be the time to do it.
Totally. But I say now, and sort of, he had his own Twitter page for a while, and he's now retired. Obviously, he never got the break. He's still only 26, and he's living somewhere in Paris with the runner-up in Miss Moldova 2012, I think. So that's his life at the moment.
Well, 'tis well for some, as they say.
Indeed, it is.
Well, Declan Varley, thanks a million for taking the time and telling us that story, because 10 years on, it is still fascinating. Thanks a million.
You're welcome.